Hey, welcome everyone. Glad to be with you here today, and really glad to be able to show you BCC 9 on Sony Vegas Pro. You know, Boris Effects has been a really big supporter of Vegas Pro. They've got Red and their Boris Effects plugin and Graffiti, and Boris can continue and complete 9. But I'll tell you, I like BCC the best, and BCC 9 has some new features in it that I got to show you today. And the first one is, I think the biggest, is this Chroma Key Studio. So let me start this plan so you can just see this footage here. So, Boris had a great Chroma Keyer to begin with. And you're thinking, how could they make that any better? But they did. They added a lot of features to it that I think help you to work with really difficult keys. And so what we thought we'd do for you today is kind of do a simple key and then do, a more difficult key. So this is the simple key. This is footage from Artbeats, shot professionally against a well-balanced lit green screen. And let me just show you Boris Effects on that. So there's two ways that we can apply Boris Effects Chroma Key Studio, and I'm going to show you both. The way that you're used to is maybe clicking here on the Effects Browser and then bringing up the effects. So that's in Keys and Blends, and then we'll add Chroma Key Studio, right? The original Chroma Keyer is still there. And that brings up the Chroma Key Studio. And you'll notice there's a lot of masking options and pre-cleanup options. We're going to go over those in the next clip because that clip really lends itself to that. This one's pretty clean. For any of you who have watched my Boris TV episodes on chroma keying, you'll know that I put on the Chroma Keyer, and then we added the matte cleanup, and then we added a matte choker. We kind of stack things together. And you may say, well, do I put the choker before the cleanup before the choker? It kind of gets confusing. So Boris has simplified the whole process by putting it all in the studio. So now if you want it to work just like the old one did, you've got the Chroma Keyer, which looks pretty much like the old Chroma Keyer, and then right after it is the matte cleanup. Right after that is the choker, a little color correction, and you're good to go. So they've made it much simpler by stacking all of these effects for you. So let's start with this Chroma Key. I'm going to open up the color picker, and it really doesn't matter where I take this color from because the screen looks fake. It's so evenly lit. So we just get a little bit of the green from the screen, and then we'll go up and view the composite mask. So you'll notice that in viewing these mask modes, they become more complex too because you can just look at the quick mask matte or the outside mask or inside mask. We'll go through those in the next clip. But the only one you need to know about if you're just doing straight keying is view the current matte, and that sums up all of the other mattes. So whatever matte you're using, they all get summed up, and that's kind of the current matte that's going out. So let's go over to our Chroma Keyer and start to play with the density and lightness. This is what we normally do. I like to bring the density down until I kind of see. So the density is controlling how dense this white mask is, and that's what's going to print through. And the lightness is controlling this the background, which is what's going to be transparent. So I like to bring the density down and then just kind of bring it up until I don't see any more black in there. And I think right about here is kind of good. And then I'll take my lightness and bring the lightness up, and you'll see this black on the side starting to get much, much cleaner. And that's probably good right about there. And I don't think you even need to move the balance. Now, I'm going to bring attention to two things. So here's something professionally shot, good Chroma Key, but there's this black in here and the blackness down here. I'm not going to worry about those too much because what they actually are, let me show you the full composite. They're actually reflective surfaces. So you actually want the background to print through. You do want to get a little bleed through so that you give the illusion of it being reflected. The last thing you would want is to key them totally out, and then you get the reflection of the green, right? So you don't want that. So in this particular one, I'm not too worried about this bleed through because they're reflective surfaces. And so pretty much, that's all there is to getting this key to work good. If I wanted to make it a little bit more believable, I might do a little bit of matte cleanup. Let's go look at the matte. I just want to check it one more time here. So I'm going to go to my view the current matte. It looks pretty good. I might be able to get this a little denser. So move this density up just a little, and then we'll open up the matte cleanup. So each one of these has a toggle. You toggle on matte cleanup, you open it up. If you open it up before you toggle it, they'll be grayed out. So if you see them grayed out, it's like, oops, forgot to do the toggle. And then we can just take and bring the white level down a bit, and that'll just clean up some of the extra dark areas in here. You don't want to do it too much because you don't want to start keying stuff out and then compensate with a little back level cleanup to make sure there's nothing here. And actually, let me turn these off and show you something brand new that we didn't have before. This is really cool. It's called View Matte Noise. So you turn that on and that nice key that you thought you had, there's actually a fair amount of noise in it, even though it was a good key. So that's when you can come in and turn this down, get rid of the noise. Now I'm going to turn the black up to get rid of this black noise on the side here. Making a great key even better. So, so those were things our eyes didn't even detect, right? Now let's look at the final composite. Really clean key. I'm going to right-click and stop scaling. It's unfortunate that Vegas doesn't have any way to scale your preview. So that's about the only way I found out to go back and forth is to zoom in and see how it looks. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of color correcting because your subject, your subject is in an artificial environment. It's never going to look like it should look in the real environment. So I'm going to bring the brightness up a little bit, right about there, and I'm going to take the hue down just a little bit, and then bring the saturation down. All right, so let me get a little more saturation there. All right, just to kind of make her sit a little bit. I'm looking at the saturation of the background, saturation of the skin tones, trying to get them to match. So, we know she's not standing on top of a mountain. Nobody's going to ever believe that. Well, she could be standing on top of one mountain looking over the valley. Who knows? But here's, how she looks just looking at her and ignoring the green background. This is kind of the before. Actually, I could do that with the color corrector. This is the before, and then this is the after, right? So just makes her sit in that image a little bit better. Okay, that's the easy stuff. So that was just pretty clean matte and fairly easy to clean up. Now we're going to go to a little harder one. And let me get this one playing for you. Right. So this footage I got from a good friend of mine, Roger Bansimer, who has this show on PBS, Painting and Travel, with Roger and Sarah Bansimer. That's Sarah. And so, as was explained, I was a finishing editor for the first 3 seasons. I'm still a technical advisor. And Roger was doing some new openings to a show, and he says, hey, I'm talking to him on the phone. Hey, I'm shooting some, Chroma Key. I said, hey, Roger, can you shoot me some really bad green screen footage? And I thought I was nuts. But I was like, no, I want to try this new Chroma Key Studio. And please make Sarah be the subject because she has blonde hair. And, blonde is kind of yellow, and green screens are green, and yellow and green are really close and really hard to, extract apart. I says, give me something good. So this is what he gave me, and this is what we made out of it. And you can see, there, these wisps of hair are still coming through really, really well. Right? The Chroma Key Studio did a really good job on it. But what this footage does is it gives me the ability to show you all these other masking options. So here is the footage. It looks like it's well lit, right? Because it's kind of even. There's no hot spots. You can see some wrinkles in it. But I'm going to add the Chroma Key Studio a little different way this time. One of the things they put into Chroma Key Studio was the light wrap. If you remember, I also added a light wrap at the end of my Chroma Key. Now you can add, and light wrap is still there. Now you can add Chroma Key Studio as a 2-to-1 composite. And if you do that, then the light wrap in Chroma Key Studio will work. So if you're ever using Chroma Key Studio and the light wrap's not working, make sure you add it as a 2-to-1 composite, a track composite mode, and not as a just a filter on the media. Okay, now that we have it in 2-to-1 composite, it looks basically the same. I'm going to go down to the Chroma Key. And we'll get a sample. I like to take a sample kind of close to my subject. So there's the key. And now we'll go up and take a look at the matte that was produced from that. So from Final Composite, I'm going to go to Current Matte. And you'll notice it's quite noisy. And if I zoom in by changing the scale, does that noise look familiar? Right? Anyone who's seen macro blocking, right, artifact compression, that is compression noise, right? And it turns out that Roger used XD-Cam footage, which is MPEG-2, which is highly compressed. And so we've got some compression stuff going on there. It's going to be very, very difficult to key this compressed video unless we do something to it first. So I'm going to go on to the event, and I'm going to add, from the image restoration category, I'm going to add BCC Noise Reduction. and I put that on, and look at how it smooths that right out. I don't even think there's anything I need to do with it. I might just turn on the sharpening in the chroma just a bit, in the luma rather, just a bit. But it kind of smoothed that all out. And so now it's going to be much, much easier to key this. Instead of having all this noisiness in the background, it's going to be much smoother, much easier to key. So that was the solution we came up for, the fact that this really was kind of noisy footage. Okay, let me show you some of the cool things that are built into this new Chroma Key Studio. I'm going to turn back on the final composite, and I'm going to turn off the Chroma Keyer because I want to show you some of these masking options. Now, you know, each of these is in a group. You keep the groups closed if you don't need them, so don't get overwhelmed with options. And you will never, probably never, ever use all of these at once, right? They're there as a tool for you to use, but you're just, you know, you're going to find one or the other is going to work for you, and you get used to them after a while. So I'm going to use all of them, even though in the final composite I'm not using all of them. I'll use them all to show you. The first one is Quick Mask. This is really cool for making garbage mats, right? So garbage mat is some way to mask out stuff you don't want. So I turn on the Quick Mask, I go get the eyedropper, I get a sample of the green screen, and it's made a solid mask, right? Really solid mask. I'm going to show you what it looks like. So now we look at the current mat, it's perfect because it has no shades of gray. It's a black and white mask. All it can do is black and white. But what it does here is it allows us to quickly get everything that's not, you know, our subject out of the way. So I'm going to take the choke and make it, it's a little more negative to, I want to get the wisps of hair back in here. And I'm going to increase the iterations just until I can see, I'm looking at this hair on top of her head. I want to make sure I still have that in there, all right? So let me turn on this mask again and show you what you have. Trying to get the concept of this. I'm playing this footage, right? And the mask is moving. So what you have is a traveling garbage mat with one click. Really cool. All right, think about if you had to keyframe this and you were trying to key, I mean, you know, some of you have keyframed garbage mats around subjects, you know, just hours of work and time you don't have. So this is a really quick way of getting a garbage mat, a traveling garbage mat, and so that you don't have to worry about the rest of your stuff outside or fairly far away from the subject. So now I can take this and I can go down to my Chroma Key and turn it back on. And I'm going to bring this back down to black so that I get the green. So this is really important. If you need to sample multiple times, obviously once you've sampled once, the green's no longer on the screen. Just drag it down to the corner, to the black here, and then, you can take your color picker again, and you can try again. So I'll take something from up here, and then see now this is the only green that I have to worry about. Okay, let me show you a couple of more of these, and then we'll come back to making the final composite. So that was your quick mask. Really, really helpful. Then a more traditional garbage mat is this outside mask and inside mask shape. So the outside mask can either be a rectangle, and you've got the little, I love these on-screen indicators. I think in Vegas 12 they came in, 11 or 12, but I'm using 13 here, and it's really great to be able to manipulate things on the screen. So for example, if you had, you're in a studio and you've got a vertical green screen, and you're shooting wide, and on the two ends of your shot there's the walls of your studio because the green screen wasn't big enough. Mask them out with this. Really easy to do. It's a really quick garbage mat. You can also make an egg shape. So let me open this up, and then you can decide where the how wide that's going to be, and you can scale it bigger. And you can actually adjust where the egg part's going to happen, right? So that's another. If you're doing a face, you'd probably do something like this, and to do a mask around a face or something, which is actually going to be more useful in the next mask. So let me turn this off, and let me show you the next one. The next one is an inside mask. So this is stuff you want to preserve. So let me turn the Chroma Key back on. That'll be an easier way to show you this. Chroma Key back on. Let's look at the current mat. Okay. Now, if there's an area, and let me turn this on. Inside mask on as a rectangle. Now, what you'll notice is that this is a white area. So if there's an area that you want to preserve, like down here, there's I don't know if you can see these on the webinar, there's some little black spots, and actually I can probably bring the density down and make them more prevalent, right? So you've got some black spots that you can't get out. All you do is bring the inside mask down, and they're gone, right? Because it's masking, it's now going to mask this area. Obviously, if the person's moving, you got to make sure it's big enough and whatnot. And you can keyframe the position if you had to. But so now this is kind of an inside mat. So one of them says, I'm going to block all the stuff on the outside. This one says, I'm going to block stuff on the inside. So maybe you want to use that on someone's face or something in an egg shape. So really two useful mats for quickly making garbage matches, the inside and the outside mask. All right. Next, we're going to move on to the pre-key cleanup. And this one, let me go show you the composite again. This one, I also really like. I'm going to go get a sample, and you just watch how the green screen changes. I'll turn it on and off for you so you can see it better. But so I get a sample of this. Do you see that brighten up? I'm going to turn it off. And hopefully this is coming through on the webinar. So that's the regular green screen. And then it just does a little subtle color correction to boost the screen a bit to make it easier to key. So now you use the Chroma Key on that. And then you've got, you know, a higher, more saturated, and you can control the saturation tolerance and whatnot, green screen to go key. But the other mode that this has, which is also really helpful, it has a push to solid. And when I saw this, I said, really? and it was really. Push to solid, boom, all that is solid, okay? And if I play, now you can see there's still some wrinkles here, so if I play with the lightness tolerance and make it less tolerant to the lightness, look at that. That is a solid green screen. Really amazing, right? And you still have some wisps of hair in here, you know. So if you've got, you know, a subject where, and we're not going to use this because of the wisps of hair, but if you just had the dog, if you had Mick, right? If you just had Mick in the shot, you know, he doesn't have any long hair. And so it would be much easier to use this on a subject like that. But, so this pushes it to a solid, then you come down to your Chroma Keyer, right? And you would click on it, and then, as I said, if you want to reset it, you bring it back to black, and then go get your eyedropper, and then, bam, that one's done. So that's another great way of cleaning up the screen. So as I said, you're probably never going to use all of these, right? You're going to, in some instances, you just need a little color correction. Sometimes you can use push to solid. Sometimes just the traveling matte. What we wound up using to make this really look good. So here's how we got the final example that you saw in the beginning. This was composed of a quick mask. So let me turn quick mask on. And as I said, I think it's already, because I played with it before, right? I just pushed it out so that I had the hairs showing here. So I used the quick mask, and then I used the Chroma Keyer after that. So let me close the pre-key cleanup. Let me turn on the Chroma Keyer, and I'll just go get my color again. Oh, let me, hang on here. Oh, I got two things going on. So let me, Chroma Keyer on, quick key mask on. Let's get that off so that I can go get a sample of that key. All right, let's get this again. Right close to here. Right, because it's the same color. There was no anything being affected by the quick mask. Okay. So now I've got the Chroma Keyer. I'm going to go look at the current matte, and then we'll go play with the density. So I'm going to bring that up just a bit. That looks pretty solid, and we'll bring the lightness up to get the... Now, before I had, and let me see if I can show you this, is why I did this. I'm going to turn this off. There was, and again, I'll use this matte noise. There was all this matte noise out here, right? Again, this is stuff that our eyes can't pick up, but you know, the computer knows. So all this matte noise, right, by putting on the quick mask, all that matte noise is just gone. Now I'm just dealing with the stuff that's really close to my subject. Okay, so let me finish tuning this mask. So the lightness looks good around. That's probably good. Now I'll go back to view the final composite. And then finally, I want to put on the light wrap. So let me go down and show you light wrap. I'm going to turn it on, open it up. And one of the things, and I'm going to just boost it up a little bit, but one of the things you can do is just look at, what it's doing is it's taking the background and it's wrapping it around the subject. So again, if I go up and look at my composite modes here, I'll close the Chroma Key, the composites, and look at the current matte. No, actually, I can look at the wrap on black is where I wanted to go. So if I look at the wrap on black, this is just the light wrap. So now you can see what's going on with this light wrap. And if I make it wider, you see it encroaches more and more on the image. And actually, this softness here, so let me explain. I'm going to make it ridiculously wide. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and go way beyond what you would probably do. And I'm going to bring the softness down to 0, and you'll notice that's the actual picture in the background. So the softness doesn't soften the matte at all. What the softness does is it softens the picture in the background. So now watch when I bring the softness up. See, it's blurring that picture in the background. So that's what the softness does in this case. All right, so I'm just going to bring the lightness up on this a bit, and then we'll go back and see what we have. So I'll go back to my final composite, and there's our chroma key. Not bad at all. We still have wisps of hair. We still have, some hair in here. I mean, really a fairly good key on a difficult subject to key, right? Because of the lighting conditions and whatnot. And then always to top it off, you go to your color corrector, right? So you want to make it look like Sarah wasn't in the studio. And so we might darken it a little bit by just changing the white output level. And I think I'm just going to bring the saturation down a bit. Right, because I'm kind of looking at these weeds over here, and I'm looking at the shirt, and trying to get that to match. And that's not too bad. I might even take the hue down to try to get really. I'm going to do this I'm going to do it by typing in it because I want it to be really, really small increment, just to kind of get some of that green out of the hair, and play with the hue to give it a little more purple. So that's Chroma Key Studio. As I said, you'll probably never use all the options on a single shot, but you'll probably use all the options on several shots, right, that you're gonna work on. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and that is Magic Sharp. So Magic Sharp is a way of adding back sharpness. Let me get this playing. Of adding back details in your footage that you wish the camera had captured. Okay. So this is one of those things where less is better. You don't want to use too much because then it looks artificial. You just want to use, so this shot, and I don't know how well this is coming across on the webinar, but it looks very, very natural, right? And so let me show you how this is done. Once again, I'm going to right click and turn off the scale so you can get closer to this leaf. And I'm just using my Shuttle Pro here to move forward in the picture. So here's the original leaf, and we're going to put BCC Magic Sharp on it. And now you might think Magic Sharp, it's going to be in blurs and sharpen. Actually, it's an image restoration tool. So it's under image restoration. And here it is, we'll put that on. And all by itself, it does a fairly good job of making this just ever so sharper. So I'm going to turn it off and turn it on and show you what's happening here. That's with it off. That's with it on. Really subtle, maybe too subtle for web technology, but we'll play with it. I'll show you how it works. Okay, there's a bunch of master controls here up at the top, which one is the sharpen amount. So I'm going to show you detail tuning. We'll go through channel and range tuning. There's a bunch of other sliders under here. This is the granddaddy of all sliders. So depending on how big this amount is, that changes the amount of all the others, the same way. So it's kind of your master slider. So you can see it can get ridiculously sharp until it's just a bunch of noise. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to keep this up just to show you how some of the other things affect. One of them, which you can see when it's real sharp like this, is the radius, right? Radius is how many pixels that it's going to analyze to sharp. And if I bring this way up, you can see it's, it's getting wider and wider, and it's actually, making objects that didn't exist. But that's your sharpen radiance, and then your threshold, and I'm going to bring this down to a reasonable amount now. I probably want it somewhere in here. This threshold is a threshold of edge detection. So as it goes up, so when it's low, it's really not playing too much with the edges. It's trying to sharpen the other things. And as you bring it up, it includes more and more of the edges until finally it's making all the edges very sharp. So let me just do on and off here. This is with it off, this is with it on, and it made those edges very sharp. So be careful with the threshold, but we are going to take the threshold up just a teeny bit. I think I'm going to take my amount down a little bit. Now, one thing you'll notice that in this area, so this was shot with a digital SLR and has some incredible depth of field, but we're getting noise in the background. We're getting sharpening of the things our eyes are telling us should be blurred, right? And that's what this next setting is for, which is the noise suppression. You want to use this sparingly, but the idea of noise suppression is to get the noise off of the things you didn't want to sharpen. So I'm just going to add a little teeny bit of noise suppression. I'm going to look at it until right about there, I think. I don't see a difference. And the way that I check is I look here where it should be blurry, and I turn the whole thing on and off, and I don't see any difference, right? I turn it off, and you got that? And then I turn it on, and it doesn't look any different. Now you look over at the leaf, turn it off, and the details go down, turn it on, and now I've got details again. So that's just where you want that noise suppression to be, but it's really cool that you can kind of suppress that background noise while you're working on the sharpening details. All right, let's look at the detailed tuning, because there's a lot you can do in here. There's 4 passes of tuning. There's a fine pass, a small, which is a little bigger than fine, a medium's bigger than small, of course, and then the coarse pass is the biggest of all. The way I like to show this to you is to go backwards on these, because it's really easy to see what coarse does. It's going to take the coarsest features, and it's only going to sharpen them. So if you think about it, the coarsest features on this leaf are the veins, and as I boost this up, pretty much just the veins, get enhanced detail. I'm not getting a whole lot. These actually look smooth, right? I'm not getting a whole lot of fine and medium detail. So you can control the coarse detail with this coarse slider. The next is the medium detail, and that is going to work on things a little bit smaller, right? So you can see that the veins aren't coming out as much, but you're getting a little finer detail in here. Then I'll turn on the small pass, and that one's really, you can get some really nice subtle detail in here with the small pass, kind of like that. And then the fine is, I'm going to turn this up so you get the fine, it's like really teeny tiny stuff, right? Really granular grains and whatnot. So by default, the fine and the small are turned on. I actually like the small pass for this particular one. I think that's look really natural to me. So I'm going to turn this off, turn it on again. I might even back it down a little bit. But remember, you're trying to show the features, the details you wish your camera had captured, but didn't. You don't want to make it look like it was sharpened. And if we look at this leaf, let me just go a few frames ahead on this. If you look at the underside of this leaf here, I'm going to turn it off, and it's just a blur, right? And then I turn it on, and I've got some nice fine detail in here. So it's a subtle plugin. It can be a very obnoxious plugin if you turn everything up, but it's, it should be used in a subtle way. Now, let me go to the top where the buds are to show you some of the other features of this. So I'm going to close my detailed tuning and now open up my channel tuning. And the channels are your normal Luma RGB Chroma channels. So if you do a Luma sharpen, you'll see that just the brightest things get sharp. Let me turn that on and off. So off, on, right? It's just sharpening based on Luma values. You can sharpen based on Chroma values, and I have to pump that really up to see a difference. but it's sharpening based on overall chroma values. And then you can take each channel and do a sharpening on the red channel. I want to slow down a little so you guys can take it in. I realize I'm rushing, I'm sorry. On the green channel. Now, obviously, you would never do this, right? But if you had something, if you had an object, and the object was blue and it was blurry, you know, you could just do the blue channel, right? And that would help. Of course, you could use the pixel chooser, you know, in all of these, you've had multiple ways of masking things, which is something I love about the BCC plugins. You can have multiple ways of picking and choosing what you're going to affect and what you're not going to affect. And then finally, there's the range tuning. And the range tuning is looking at high, medium, and shadow values. So this is the highs. So the highs, so what's red is what's not going to be affected, right? So there's only a couple little real highs up here that are going to be affected. The midtones, so here you got a fair amount of mids. The rest of these must all be shadows. And then you've got the shadow. Yeah, there you go. So the rest of that is all shadow, right? So these are the shadows, and the reds aren't going to be affected here. But it allows you, right? Very often you never want to sharpen shadows, right? Because that looks like noise. You know, you just want to do like midtones and whatnot. So if we look at, you know, the midtones are kind of in here. I can also adjust the ranges. So I can say where this midtone range, you know, starts and stops. So I could bring more things by lowering the low end of the range. I could bring more things in. And then you can turn this off and then use these sliders to say, yeah, now I want to boost things in the midtones. And you'll notice no noise back here, right? Nothing got boosted, just the things in the midtones got boosted. Okay, so that's kind of all the stuff on Magic Sharp. I have one more example here. And so this is, so as I said, I've been working with my good friend Roger Bansimer. And Roger, so you got to understand what him and Sarah do. They drive around the country. He's a painter. If you haven't seen a show on PBS, you know, check it out if it's in your area, Painting and Travel with Roger and Sarah Bansimer. He'll see things that just, you know, suit his fancy and say, that, you know, barn looks great. And they'll stop the Winnebago and pull out the paints and, you know, and paint it. And, you know, and Sarah will kind of get the backstory on the old barn. And she does kind of a travel log. And he set up, spur of the moment, and he uses several cameras. This is like, you know, one of his B-rolls, and it's his GoPro camera. And he says, John, I left the plastic, you know, on the camera, and it's defocused, and I can't use this shot. Is there anything you can do to help me? And so I said, you know, Boris just came out with this Magic Sharp thing, man. Let's use it. So, so that's what I did. And actually, all I did was use one of the presets. So let me show you. So we'll put Magic Sharp on here. I'm going to zoom in as much as I can so you can see the grass and gravel there. And I believe I used the big boost. And it just gave, you know, this is what it off. This is what it on. It just gave a sense of detail, right, that wasn't there before. And, you know, at the end of the day, Roger said, this is great. I can use this in the show. This, you know, it's not perfect, but it kind of stands up to the rest of the footage that's in the show. And so he wound up using it. So Magic Sharp kind of saved the day there. So you never know when you're going to want to, you know, use this stuff in post to get yourself out of a production problem. Okay, let's move on to the final segment, which is the new transitions that are in BCC 9. And I'll tell you what Boris did here is took some of my favorite plugins and made them transition. So let me get this rolling for you. All right, so that's TV Damage, that's Swish Pan. This one is Lens Flare. The next one is Film Glow. You know I didn't memorize them because I'm reading the little markers over here. The next one is the Twister. And I'm going to show you each one of these close up and personal. Then we got the Rays Dissolve coming up. So that's Puffy Rays, like as a transition, right? And then there's BCC Composites. You can have interesting compositing modes. There's BCC Blur Dissolve, which is kind of subtle. There's a Ripple Dissolve, which you never think you would use in a dissolve, but it really makes the point. And then we end it with another BCC TV. So let me show you each one of these, because I just want to take you through kind of my favorite features of each one. The thing, you know, kind of the knobs and dials that I like to play with when I throw them on there. So let's start with damaged TV. Now, for those of you who saw my last webinar, let me get this rolling. For those of you who saw my last webinar on Boris Red, you know that we spent about 15 minutes in Boris Red actually creating this transition from the BCC damaged TV, right? And so Boris, just took and said, why not? And now it's drag and drop. So 15 minutes be gone, right? You just drag and drop it on, and there you go. You've got this damaged TV. Now, for those of you who've been watching my Boris TV episodes, the last two that I've done on BCC Grunge, which is the Deadliest Catch and Game of Pawns. Boris has a new opening that kind of uses his Boris TV logo into a TV set, and I thought, why not have the transition between that and my tutorial be the damaged TV? So it's subtle. You probably didn't catch it. Go back and look for it. I actually used the damaged TV transition to transition from the opening of the show into the tutorial. So just quickly to show you some of the cool stuff in damaged TV. You probably saw it when I was playing with it in Red, but some of it's worth going over. You can control the roll offset. When it's a transition, doesn't matter that much. Unless it's a real quick transition, it's not rolling where you want, but you can determine where that roll is going to start. You can have more or less distortion, so it can be nice and clean. You can get it really, really distorted. Then you see these chromatic aberrations here. You got total control over those, so we can go in and we can back down the intensity on that to nothing, or put it somewhere in the middle, wherever you want the chromatic aberrations. And then finally, you can control things like the scan lines, the thickness of the lines, how thick or thin they are, how evenly they're spaced apart, or they're very closely spaced apart. So just lots of control over getting the TV look that you want. So that's kind of a. The next one is BCC Swish Pan. So let me go get that and drag it on. And one of the things I love about Vegas, you can have the timeline playing, and you can just drag and drop transitions, and they happen, right? And you can do multiple of them. It's really kind of an organic way of working for me than being predisposed of saying I'm going to use this here and I already know it. So the Swish Pan was my other favorite transition. So if you look at my previous Boris TV episodes, I use a Swish Pan between the opening and my tutorial. And this reminds me, for those of you who grew up in the 60s, this reminds me of like Get Smart, A Man from U.N.C.L.E., all those spy things had Swish Pans. I don't know why. But that was the way to get from one scene to the next. And so I really like the Swish Pan. One of the things I think would be better on this particular shot, the girls, let me stop this so you can see it. The girls in this shot are moving off to the right, but the Swish Pan is going off to the left. So one of the things I want to do is change that, and you can change the direction. You could make it go from the top, and we could make it go from the bottom, and I'm just going to have it make it go right. So I think that looks a little bit more natural, is it swishing over to the right. Now, there's a new thing that's introduced in these BCC Transition, and that's animation tuning, and I really love it. The animation tuning, I'm going to turn it on so that you can see the ease curve. It allows you to control the curve. So you can, if you want this to ease in and ease out, right? It's automatically controlled in here. So we can give this thing a bit of an ease going in, and maybe a little more coming out here, and then we'll play it. And I could actually play it while this was tuning. You can see the overlay, but that makes it a little bit quicker. Right? And I just wanted it to be a little faster pan. But notice what's happening here. Because I played with the ease, now I'm seeing the edge of, because really all this is a push, right? It's a push that's masked by the panning. And so we've got a solution for that as well. If we go to our blur extras and we look at the blur delay and just bring it back a bit, there you go. So that's all it took, just nudging that back just a little bit. And you could nudge it back as much as you need. Let me bring this back, and I think it's pretty good, but we can bring it in a little more. But it just blurs it a little bit more. It starts to blur a little bit sooner so that you get rid of those. So that's BCC Swish Pan. The next one is BCC Lens Flare. So this is taking the Boris lens flare and making it a transition. So let me go in here and actually, so as I was talking about, there's a bunch of these. So there's lens flare dissolve. So I'll drop that one on so you can see it. It's kind of neat. There is a lens flare round. I'll drop that on and watch that one go for a bit. There is lens flare spiked. And then there is this lens flash, and that's the one that we want to put on here is a lens flash. Right? So this is the one I wanted to use. So one of the things I like about this lens flash, and let me show you quickly, there's a new BCC browser where you can launch the Effects Browser and just see how these, and you can play the footage, right? So you can go through these, and I'll go over the browser a little more later on, but you can go through these and find one that you like. And I kind of like this default cool blue one. That's the one we're going to modify. And one of the things I really like about this is you can play with the source point animation. So I'm going to go to the beginning here, and I'm going to move the source point down to the hikers so that this is starting at the hikers. Right? Nice flash that starts at the hikers. I don't like the fact that it ends somewhere in the mountains on the scenery here. I'd rather it like end up, in the sky. So one of the things that I can do is make it move from start to end automatically. So that'll give me a second pointer, and then I can say, yeah, I want it to end maybe somewhere up here, and then we'll play it. And now the flash, just let that cache a little bit. Now the flash is going from one direction to the other. So really easy way, to animate this and do kind of this start to end stuff. The neat thing about this, there's no keyframing, right? And that's what's really nice about it. I know you've all been there where you've keyframed something meticulously and then you make it longer. And now you got to go back and adjust all the keyframes. Not with start and end. Start's always at the start, end's always at the end. No keyframing, no problem. So I really like using this rather than using keyframes. Okay, let's look at the next one. The next one is a BCC Film Glow Dissolve. So we'll go to my transitions, and we'll go to Film Glow and put the Film Glow Dissolve on. Now, this is created from BCC Film Glow. I love the Film Glow transition. It's nice and organic and milky, and I just like the way it looks. And I'm showing you things in each one of these. It's not that that's the only feature that this one only has this feature. So I'm going to use the color picker on this, but several of them had color pickers, right? So I'm just trying to do different things on different transitions, kind of show you some of the options. But I think you're going to see a lot of these options in many of them. So I'm going to go to the color picker, and I want to pick some of the orange color here so that my glow is actually orange, right? And so now I'll go back and watch it, and now I've got a nice orange glow. So real easy color picker, really easy way to make the thing kind of match more naturally with the video that you're using. Again, I want to go to the animation tuning and show you something different. You'll notice there's more parameters on this one. So the animation tuning isn't always the same on all of them. Some of them have more parameters than the other. I'm going to park the head right in the middle there, and we'll go play with the animation tuning. You'll notice, in addition to the ease in and the ease out, I have an ease mid, right? So I have a middle here. What that allows me to do, let's say I wanted this thing to really bloom, right? I can really make, this curve so it's really blooming in the middle. And let's watch that, right? So you'll see that you really get this big bloom in the middle, right? And if you wanted the bloom to be a little bit shorter, you could always take these curves and bring them down a bit. So it eases in, eases out a little more. And then you'll get not so much of a bloom. The other thing you can do is make this negative, and now you've got more of a flash. Okay, so now we can control, and let me turn this off so I think you can see it better. And I hope these are coming through on the webinar. They'll probably come through good on the playback. But now it's more of a subtle flash in the middle. And you'll notice that it actually starts to dissolve before you get to the flash, and that might not be desirable. So then again, that's what this dissolve duration is. Rather than have it, go over the entire 2 images, you can cut this down and be much shorter. So this is, pure linear dissolve. And then you can cut it down and make it be much shorter so that the dissolve matches the flash. So you just have an incredible, see there, and then it's just dissolving during the flash. I mean, it gives you a lot of control over, how these things are going to interact with the underlying footage. Okay, the next one is BCC Twister. And we selected Twister because this is two sides of the same rock formation, right? We have the campers on one side, then we go to the other side of the rock formation, and we wanted to kind of flip over. So there's BCC Twister. And you think, it's a twist. How many parameters could it have? But there's a lot of creative control here. So let me, again, park my cursor in the middle. I can determine where the flip happens from. And actually, I can do this in real time, right? So I can have it happen down here. I can have the flip happen up here. It's almost like kicking a rug, down here, wherever you want that flip to be. So if there's some point of interest that you want it to flip on, like maybe that's the other rock formation in the background or something, you can use that and control how the twister is twisting. We also have a direction here, so you can the axis is minus 120, so this is kind of 360-degree stuff here. But you can have it twist the other way, right? So if you want it twisting vertical, so you have a lot of control over what direction this twists in. And also, if you go into your animation tuning, right, you can use your ease in and ease out. Now, so here I'll make it. I'm going to have this thing flip really, really tight at the end, right? So here's, it's really flipping tight at the end. Or you can have it go the other way, in which case it flips really quickly, but then it lays down really slowly. So see how slow this last area is laying down, right? A lot of control over doing these twists. All right, the next one is a raise dissolve, and this is from Puffy Rays as a transition. So we'll go to BCC raise dissolve, drop this on, and start that playing. So these are, your Puffy Rays. One of the things I like about it, again, many of them have this start and end point, so that I can go start and end, and I can say I want this to start over here, and I want, what do you do with rays, right? You make them go across the screen. So it starts on one side, and then the rays kind of go across, start and end. And once again, no keyframing. Make the transition longer. It follows the transition. The other thing that's really neat about this one, and I'm just going to use the start for it because I want it to start from a position here, is this region animation down here. In the region animation, you can decide to have this animate out from a region, and then it just emanates from where that point is. And you could use circles and lines, so you can have it, have a line across the sky coming down. But now you've got these rays coming out, from a circle like that, and you probably could actually use the animation on this one, start to end, and then it's kind of like a big sunblast traveling across the sky. So, lots of creative things you can do with this. And, you really need to sit down and play, just sit down and play with these things, right? And see what they do, because sometimes you really, surprise yourself. This next one is the Composite Dissolve. And so this has a bunch of compositing modes that you can use to dissolve from one to the next. And actually, it has dual compositing modes. So let me stop it and park it in the middle and just show you the difference here. So let me turn it off. That is a simple crossfade, right? It's just equally blending 50-50, one frame with the next. But this is a composite dissolve. You see how this pops, right? How this gets, because it's using hard light and it's mixing it with screen. So you have a primary dissolve type, and then you have a secondary dissolve type. So it's all your normal lighten, darken, multiply, all the stuff you're used to. And then you can control the mix. So if I mix it all the way to the left, it's pure screen. If I mix it all the way to the right, it's pure hard light. So if you wanted hard light, but you just wanted to back it off a little by adding a little screen, you have a lot of control over, bringing these two in and making one mix from one to the other. So it's just a really, you look at the dissolve and you say something's different about that. Right? It's more organic. It's more film-like. It's more, it's just not a crossfade. And so that's a cool way to make your dissolves a little more interesting. Okay, the next one here is a blur dissolve. Let me get that going. So we'll do BCC Blur Dissolve and drop that in. It defaults to a horizontal blur. And you could make it as much horizontal or as little horizontal as you need. You can back the horizontal all the way down and make it a vertical blur. Right? So you've got control over the, and you can make it blur in both directions. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't just make the whole thing kind of, you know, blur right out into nothingness. But I'm going to make this just a horizontal blur for a moment. And let's open up the automation tuning. Love, as you can tell, I love playing with automation tuning. And we're just going to make that peak a little bit shorter. And I want to make the dissolve duration a little bit shorter, so that it just kind of dissolves right in the middle. Right? Again, you can fine tune these things, you know, to your heart's content here. So that's the blur dissolve. Next one here is the ripple dissolve. Now, ripple dissolve, it didn't occur to me that to use this on this shot, but this really works well when you start to tweak it. So again, sometimes you have to take, you know, what you got and play with it until it doesn't look like, you know, what it originally was. So so I drop it on, and what do I have? It's a drop of water. And, you know, your eye sees that and you go, oh, drop of water, you know, got it. However, there's a fire here, right? So how does the drop of water and the fire go together? I don't get it. But if we tweak it a bit, we can turn it into something that does match the fire. So just to show you some of the things around here, you've got a wave height that you can play with, so you can make these waves more pronounced. And let me just stop it on the wave so you can see that. So you can make these waves more pronounced or less pronounced, and then you can play with the height of them, so you can get them really, really tight, really tiny, or make the height be, make the width be a little bit wider. So I'm just going to play with the wave width and make it a little bit wider. I don't want it to be quite so many in a row. And the other thing you can do is play with the lights that are shining off the wave here, right? You can go sample like some of the fire, right, and get a more orange from the fire in here. But actually for this one, I don't want any light at all. So I'm going to turn the light down to 0. And you might think, huh, it's gone. But actually it's not, because the wave is still perceptible. So let's play the wave, and hopefully you can see on the webinar, there's the wave subtly coming out. And now if I take this wave, right, and I move the center of it down onto this fire down here, now it kind of looks like, and let me make it a little bit, I'm going to get that width down a little bit more, right? It's kind of like heat wave. It's just kind of like, you know, heat waves emanating from the fire. And so it no longer looks like, you know, a drop in the water. So that's, you know, that's one thing you can do with, you know, using a ripple, where you think ripple, water, and, you know, you can turn it into a heat wave. And then this last one was just the damaged TV again, the damaged TV dissolve. But this time we took the static roll, I think it was the static roll down was the one, static roll down. And so it's just kind of rolling down and off the screen, and there we go, we're out again. Now, there's two last things that I want to show you. On two of these, this one here, we applied some effects. And so let me open up the effects. And there's the BCC 2-strip color on this one. The BCC 2-strip color is brand new for BCC 9. For those of you who are not familiar with this 2-strip color effect, so think of it this way, right? Everyone is familiar with 3 CCD cameras. Why do you have a 3 CCD camera? Well, you got red, green, and blue, right? And you have 1 CCD for each one of them. And now they're even doing 3 CMOS cameras, red, green, blue. Well, prior to 1935, there was no red, green, blue, because they didn't have blue. They just had like red and green, and they synthesized through yellow filters and some detail process. They synthesized the blue because they only had 2 colors to work with the cameras. They only had 2 prints that they put filters on. And the blue was never quite right. And that's why you see these old color movies, and they look like they were colored with crayons or something, right? It's an unnatural color. And it's because it never quite got the blue right. So I thought this was a great one to show the effects browser. So here is the new BCC Effects Browser. Look at all, you know, those different colors, right? And actually you can play this right, while you're shooting, while you're sampling these, so you can see what the video looks like live. You can also have compare modes. So you can compare side by side if you want to see unaltered and altered, or you can do a split where you get to determine where the split happens, right? So there's a couple of ways to look at this. There's also, I have Red now on half resolution. You can change the resolution so that it plays back quicker. And then there's two ways to look at these presets. You can look at them in a list. So this icon here shows them in thumbnails, but you look at them in a list. So if you like lists, you can just look at them that way. If you want to use the search, you could just search for maybe fade, and then only the presets that have fade in there. Of course, there's a lot. Let me do it. Let me do a blue. Filter out more of them. And there's the only two that have blue in there, right? So if you had a big long list, you can filter through them. Or you can use the thumbnails. You can control the size of the thumbnails. And then as you notice, as I'm picking them, my history is growing over here. So it's showing me the ones that I use the most. And then usually the one you want is going to be right down here. And then when you find something you like, you just click apply, and you're done. You've got that new two-strip color effect, which looks great. It does look like those old movies. The last thing I'm going to show you real quick, I know we're almost up to the top of the hour, is this shot here. Now, you wouldn't think there's anything on this, but actually, we threw BCC Vignette on there. So look at the before, click it on, look at the after. I mean, it just gives the shot character, right? So this vignette's really cool. I used it in the Game of Thrones. I used it in the Deadliest Catch tutorials. You can select your vignette color. You can control the opacity of the vignette. But you can also, when only have color, you can have a blur. And so you can decide to do a blur, so you can see these edges down here are starting to get blurred, or you can do a color and a blur. And you can play with the blur offset so that the blur actually blurs more than the color vignette does, right? So they can be kind of independent of each other. So it's just a nice stylistic way. We can launch the effects browser, see some different ones, and then apply them, right? This one's really blurry and really heavy. So the vignette, I thought it was really, really subtle. On that last one, you can hardly tell it was there. It looked really natural, and that's kind of the look you're going for. Okay, so that wraps it up. We're at the top of the hour. I didn't leave any time for questions, but I guess we can stay late, get a hall pass or something. And it's been a pleasure showing you all these new BCC filters. And if you have any ideas on BCC TV training, just send them to me, and I'll try to get them out to you. Thanks.